All right, still with me to discuss is trial attorney Holly Davis and investigative reporter with ABC 17 News, Lucas Geisler. And I want to go back to you, Holly. You mentioned something about the theory of the case and something that this defense could have done maybe differently to sort of help along their case. Because each piece of evidence, I felt, had a little bit of something wrong with it that if you dealt with it the right way, gave you a little bit more of a chance. So I'd love to get your thoughts.
Absolutely. I always tease my defense lawyer friends because it seems to me all the time that their defense is, I know that it looks like my client did this, but maybe he didn't. And that's not going to save the day at the when the jury's deliberating, especially not with these facts and 8 women on this jury. I think this case was won in the jury selection process, but that's just my 2 cents on that. But the point is that if your defense attorney is relatable to these jurors and is really focusing in on the questions about each of these pieces of evidence and presenting subtly or sometimes overtly a theory of a case that this man loved this woman more than he loved his wife, why would he ever do such a thing? We have to ask ourselves, then what is the explanation for all these items being close by? And we just don't have that. And so I'm confused as to why this particular defense attorney was adopting a rather cavalier approach. Maybe it was a little bit of a boxing match between the prosecutor and the defense attorney, but you lose the jury when you get a little bit comfortable with the jury about the facts. I think this defense attorney did a great job with the facts presented. Don't know why they didn't take a plea deal, but I'm curious to know why they didn't try to explain away and make more relatable, if possible, the fact that this man was living 2 lives. I heard the defense attorney many times say, "Yeah, he had 2 women he was with," but that's not enough to explain to this jury. We have to what was going on. How much did he love his girlfriend? Was he trying to divorce his wife? Would he ever have murdered the person he was actually in love with? And show us more of that. Don't just gloss over the fact that he was, living deplorably a double life that everyone hates him for. I mean, the moment that this case is presented to 8 women and 4 men, this guy's hateable. So how are we going to walk that back as a defense strategy? I didn't see any attempt to walk back the hateability of this defendant.
Yeah, I have to agree with you there. I thought there was a way to soften him up a little bit. They didn't take that. But, one of the